Hi everyone, welcome to the Totally Football Show. Just friends getting together on a Sunday evening to put down some thoughts about another big weekend in the Premier League for your enjoyment. Whether it's here on YouTube, live on a Sunday evening, or perhaps in the comfort of whatever environment you choose for your podcast listening. Colin Millar's here with us. Hey Colin.
Hey James, how are you?
Hey, I'm very well. Have you had a nice afternoon?
Oh yes, packed full of Premier League football. I wouldn't rather spend it any other way.
Bingo. Tom Williams, you're fresh off the Euro stuff from Paris.
Yes, fresh-ish within the last 4 hours.
Yeah.
So yeah, we'll say fresh.
That counts. And Daniel Storey's on the big screen, of course. Viewer, stroke listener. Mm-hmm. Hey, Daniel.
Hello, James.
You've been everywhere. You were in Sheffield today, is that right?
Yes, saw Sheffield Wednesday get relegated at Bramall Lane.
But it's only February, Daniel.
Today. Indeed, the earliest ever relegation, they will 100% get the lowest ever points total. They actually showed a bit of fight in the second half because Sheffield United had a man sent off, but yeah, pretty depressing stuff for them.
Right. They did also get an 18-point penalty, which is why they are in such a terrible position, poor chaps. You've also, this weekend, been to both Gateshead and Truro.
Ish. Because of the Sheffield derby, I drove to Truro on Friday morning, met up with Gateshead supporters there, spent the evening with them, went to the game on Saturday, which I only realised on Friday night was a 5:30 kickoff, had been moved to TV, which meant that my drive home post-game to Nottingham to then head to Sheffield was 2 hours later than I thought. So yeah, I got home about 1:30, left the house about 8:20 a.m., which was, not enough sleep.
Not enough sleep. You did see a huge result, though, down in Truro.
Yeah, Gateshead had lost, before last Tuesday, they'd lost 15 games in a row. They're bottom of the National League. And yeah, they won. They had 3 shots in the game. 2 of them went in. The second has sort of gone viral enough for non-league goals, but it was a phenomenal turn and then solo dribble and finish from the edge of the area. So, and yeah, it was you go and do those pieces and you have this idea of how you want them to end, and the team winning, having lost 15 games in a row recently with a wonder goal while everybody goes mad and jumps up and down is pretty much what you can ask for.
Right. I imagine the point of the piece was that there are fans from Gateshead who, even with their team losing 15 games in a row, were still prepared to make the longest journey ever undertaken by English football fans. Is that right?
Yeah, for a league game. Yeah. So 924-mile round trip. There were actually 157 Gateshead fans there, which is a slight bone of contention because at Halifax last Tuesday there were 27, which is one of the closer away games. So I think there were a kind of plenty of supporters thinking, well, this is the challenge, this is the one I want to do. So I spent the weekend with the Supporter Society, who are the guys who, most of those have not missed an away game in 4 years, which is, when you're a fan of Gateshead, is some effort. So yes, as long as all those are at Solihull Moors in a couple of weeks, it's okay.
All right then.
Kind of inverse fair weather fans, like only going when it's really complicated and turning their noses up at more straightforward trips. Well, so there you go.
Yeah. All right. Speaking of games which went viral, I am indebted to the Lim Report and others who, actually no, it's all the Lim Report, but the Lim Report posted about it many times, talking about a game which, if you haven't checked it out, listener stroke viewer, you really need to. It's Wellington Phoenix against Auckland FC, and a quite staggeringly unfortunate own goal by the Wellington goalkeeper. Is that right, Tom?
Yes, Josh Oluwayemi.
All right.
To give him the credit.
Yeah.
Basically, an opposition player hoofs a clearance downfield, and Oluwayemi has strayed from his box. It's all alone as the ball descends towards him from the sky, and for some reason decides to try and head it, but succeeds only in heading it into the net that he has vacated momentarily from about 25 yards.
Right.
So a goalkeeper heading in an own goal from less than 25 yards. They lost 5-0, by which time he had been subbed off at half-time, and his coach, Giancarlo Italiano, which sounds like the spoof name you give to an Italian coach in a football sitcom, announced his resignation in the post-match press conference. So not only one of the greatest own goals of all time, but with the most phenomenal fallout as well.
Right, Daniel.
to link to what is inevitably going to be our next subject, Oluwayemi is also a Tottenham Hotspur Academy graduate.
Of course, of course he is.
Bad stuff. Spursy.
Chapeau, Mr. Storey.
You can try and escape the Spurs. You can go halfway around the world, but it will find you. Sorry, Spurs fan.
Final destination.
Spurs edition.
Spurs edition. All right. Well, Daniel, you want to talk about the North London derby. We'll do that after we check on the results from this match day 27 of the Premier League season. Arsenal got their first win in 3, but their second straight 4-1 win over Tottenham Hotspur by that scoreline on Sunday afternoon. That leaves City 5 points back, although with a game in hand after Man City beat Newcastle on Saturday 2-1. A brace from Nick O'Reilly, giving them what was their 17th win in a row against the Magpies at the Etihad. That's a record in the Premier League, I think even beyond the Premier League. Just top division record. Madness. Elsewhere on a stormy afternoon at Selhurst Park on Sunday, Crystal Palace did beat Wolves 1-0. That was a slightly close thing. Palace getting their first home win in any competition since November. Fulham, meanwhile, surprised everyone by going up to Sunderland and winning 3-1, ending thus a run of 3 straight defeats for the Black Cats. That's now back-to-back home losses. And a huge goal Sunday afternoon from Alexis McAllister in the 97th minute at the City Ground in the game between Nottingham Forest and Liverpool. Gave Liverpool a big, big win, one that leaves them level with Chelsea and Man United in the race for top 5 football and leaves Nottingham Forest just 2 points above the bottom 3. Crikey. Chelsea this weekend drew 1-1 at home to Burnley after leading for almost the whole game. The Blues have now failed to beat any of the promoted sides at Stamford Bridge this season. Elsewhere, Brighton beat Brentford 2-0 at the G-Tech. That's only the Seagulls' second win in 14 matches. 1-1 for Leeds, away to the slumping again Aston Villa. And no goals, but possibly a very useful point for West Ham at home to Bournemouth, despite having 20 shots, the Hammers, 20 shots. Anyway, Everton Man United is coming up on Monday night. United with a win would move clear of Chelsea and Liverpool into 4th spot. We begin with the team at the top. Dum, dum, dum. Which comms are you going with, Charlie, producer Charlie?
The Gyökeres 4th goal.
Gyökeres. All right. The sweet touch of Gyökeres. Gyökeres. See what I'm doing there?
Nicely done.
Yeah. Arsenal fans appreciated that. 2 players who've had a lot of questions about them, I guess, Eze and Gyökeres, both coming up with big, big answers. As Arsenal pick up what I read is their biggest win away at Spurs since 1978. Ooh, that feels big, Colin.
It feels very big, James. And the Spurs stadium announcer just before kickoff said that sometimes there's a fire to be lit. They are nervous as hell. We're calm. We're ready.
The Spurs announcer said sometimes there's a fire to be lit.
Yeah, I'm not sure which team he was talking about who was nervous as hell, but Tottenham were... I mean, look, there's ways of analysing this game, and I think at half-time, and Tottenham had got back into the game at 1-1 with the Oluwayemi goal, which was a gift from Arsenal. Declan Rice had dallied on the ball on the edge of his own area 24 seconds after play had restarted from Arsenal taking the lead down at the other end. Arsenal players had done a team huddle, and Declan Rice kind of took over, and he was pointing to his forehead, being like, concentrate, this year we're 1-0 up, we need to concentrate, focus, this is just 1-0, 24 seconds later. Slip. Yeah, very, very much the Steven Gerrard vibes coming back again. And at that moment, you kind of thought, Tottenham are back into this out of nothing. Could this be a repeat of Arsenal's collapse, really, at Wolves just a few days earlier? And after the break, it was really one-way traffic. Arsenal were dominant, apart from the one moment where Oluwayemi thinks that he has equalised for a second time, and from what was Spurs' second shot of the game, really. And it had been disallowed by the on-field referee for a push on Gabriel. Now, what I would say very quickly about this is that I think it's an easy decision to give because there's 2 hands on the back of Gabriel. But I'm not sure that justifies the decision being correct. I think in terms of optics, it's an easy decision to give, but in terms of the force of what that was, and Gabriel was always trying to win a free kick in that situation, And that's the one issue from Arsenal, is that for both of those incidents, they were so passive in central defence. And that was the same on Wednesday against Wolves. It was the same against Brentford as well the previous week. So that is an issue they've got. But in this game, Arsenal were just far too good in all departments. And obviously they got their 4 goals, as we'll speak about.
And I think what sticks in the craw, particularly for Tottenham, with regard to the goal that was ruled out, is that, as video producer Jake, who watched the game with us, pointed out immediately, when Hugo Ekitike put both hands on the back of Sergio Romero as he rose to score what I think proved to be Liverpool's winner in the fixture between Spurs and Liverpool at Tottenham Hotspur Stadium just before Christmas, the goal stood. And the punditry was, well, if you're going to be a centre-back in the Premier League, you've got to be stronger than that. Zero sympathy for Romero. And last season, when Gabriel scored the winner in this exact same fixture, there was similar placing of hands on an opponent's back. And it was that the classic kind of thing. I think had the referee not ruled that goal out, I don't think VAR would have intervened. As Colin says, whenever you see a player putting both hands on an opponent's back, they're running a massive risk, but it did feel soft. And obviously, if that goes in and it stands, you potentially get a different outcome, even though I think Arsenal were, worthy winners in the end.
So I was just updating my connection had gone. Worthy winners at the end. We'll pick it up there. Sorry, Charlie. Worthy winners at the end. Indeed, Daniel, would that be your reading? Arsenal, who had wobbled despite having the leads against Brentford and Wolves, this time around came up with something of a statement the second half?
Yeah, I thought Tottenham were appalling in pretty much every department. Igor Tudor picked a back 3, and yet Vitor Gyökeres had 3 central defenders and yet had about 25 minutes to touch and score his first goal. It was a really good finish, but it looked like one of those shots they practiced before a game when the volley just rolled to them. There was so much time for him. He used wing backs, but then that never worked because Jed Spencer's got pinned back by Bukayo Saka and Archie Gray isn't a wing back. I think it ended up with Matthias Tell at left wing back. There was four central midfielders on the pitch at the start. And yet, so that's Bissouma, Gallagher, Sarr and Palhinha, who was used as a sort of right-sided centre-back. And yet there was so much space in midfield to Arsenal. In the first half, they sort of played it quite slowly, sort of looked some standard Arsenal, sort of probing, looking for an opening. Second half, they realised you could just run through the middle. There was no one there. And then even in the final third, my vague memories of Tottenham actually creating their own chances or trying to is just one player trying to dribble for about 30 yards and eventually getting crowded out. It happened to Xavi Simons 2 or 3 times. It happened to Richarlison twice. I thought they were absolutely appalling.
Really?
And yeah, I did. I don't think they did anything. I know the game had the slight sort of vague element of this could be close because Spurs were gifted a goal straight afterwards. And Declan Rice, as Colin says, kind of sort of laughing to himself at how he's been hoisted by his own petard. But yes, Tottenham were appalling. And I thought it was really interesting that before the game and in the first 10 minutes, there was this real big energy from the stadium. We've got rid of the manager we don't want. This guy's going to bring the fire. We're going to be upbeat. We're going to be at it. And they were for about 10 minutes before falling behind. And by the end of the game, the stadium was basically empty. And that is pretty symbolic of, they've got a huge injury list. There's a massive disconnect with the owners and supporters. This manager has come in and said after the game, there are ways of phrasing that. And Tudor after the game, he started by saying, yeah, we need to work hard, which is pretty cliche playbook. Then he said, well, we're playing the best team in the world in Arsenal. I thought, if I'm you, mate, that's not how I'd frame this game by saying that Arsenal are the best team in the world at the moment. That's not going to go down particularly well, I don't think. It just all looked a bit messy. Arsenal were really good and we shouldn't gloss over that. And Eze stepped up in this fixture again, fair play. Gyökeres, probably the best I've seen him play this season. But boy, Spurs were really bad.
All right, plenty of people commenting on our YouTube channel. Pineapple Tree Trunk says we knew Dr. Tottenham could help cure a side poor form, but it's new that they're offering bespoke treatments for individual players. Cage, long series of numbers, says Spurs aren't getting relegated. 4 points. 4 points now the gap. Spurs aren't getting relegated unless they lose every game and West Ham turn into 2011 Barcelona, which doesn't sound likely. Do we share Cage, long series of numbers, confidence about Spurs' invulnerability at the bottom end?
Oh no, I definitely think they could go down. I definitely think they could go down. I think they've been the worst team in the Premier League this calendar year. And obviously Igor Tudor's come in for this match, and I don't think many people know too much about what he's like tactically, but he's like a short-term fix guy. But as Daniel says, I think systematically this was a bit of a mess. You had a lot of players in positions where they were very clearly uncomfortable. Arsenal did have so much space in dangerous areas. And yeah, I mean, Eberechi Eze, who had scored a hat-trick against Tottenham earlier in the season, obviously there was the big episode last summer where he had looked set to join Tottenham, and at the 11th hour, Arsenal came swooping in and he made the move. And Sky Sports, who were covering the game in the UK, had said that this was his first shot on target in the Premier League in the 3 months since that 4-1 victory over Tottenham. So he is obviously a guy who can come in and perform in these games. But it also speaks to Tottenham's inability sort of across the pitch, because they carried no attacking threat in this game. The only attacking threat they had was Arsenal mistakes. There was no sustained pressure throughout this game, and yet defensively they were really, really poor. There was just so much time and space for Arsenal's attackers.
And again, to cite video producer Jake, was particularly exercised by the sight of
Gyökeres?
No, yeah, the one trying to defend him.
Oh, Archie Gray,
yeah, Archie Gray,
on the final
was
game.
particularly exercised by the sight of Archie Gray trying to stop Gyökeres as he proceeded, as he basically honed in on goal to make it 4-1.
I mean, it felt like the closest we've come to seeing specifically the sporting version of Victor Gyökeres. And, watching him occasionally last season, he seemed to get an awful lot of goals by running in behind, which you can only do if you're playing against a team that is playing with a high defensive line. Most teams don't do that against Arsenal because they know that it's suicidal. But I think because Igor Tudor was so determined to get Spurs high up the pitch, we saw the man marking, which is one of his trademarks, particularly in the first half. There's a video that has popped up on social media of him screaming at Mickey van der Ven to push up out of possession, and Van der Ven looking a little bit unsure as to whether that's actually a good idea. And Gyökeres showed what can happen when A, you give him acres of room to run into, and B, you give him centre-backs that he can bully. The duel with Dragusin was relatively well balanced to begin with, and then Gyökeres got back on top. And yeah, by the end, he's running past 19-year-old Archie Gray, who is a midfielder, filling in as a right-sided centre-back. Most teams won't make that mistake against Gyökeres, but Spurs did and paid the price.
I did. Give us a stat about Eberechi Eze in the derby.
He has now scored as many goals for Arsenal against Spurs in Premier League North London derbies as Thierry Henry and Robin van Persie, and trails only Emmanuel Adebayor, an all-time Arsenal top scorer in this fixture, brackets in the Premier League era, close brackets, Robert Pires.
Extraordinary. Daniel, the gap now 5 points over Man City, the very same 5 points that City themselves have dropped against Spurs, which will be a big comfort to Tottenham Hotspur, of course. A week ago, actually no, not even a week ago, 3 days ago, we were convinced that clearly Arsenal were now going to bottle the title. Are they now definitely going to win it?
It was the perfect fixture and the perfect opponent to play. That now feels like hindsight, but if you'd have asked me on Friday, I'd have said exactly the same thing, because Tottenham are a mess. And if Arsenal are good at one thing, or the thing they're best at, and Arteta is best at, it's identifying an obvious flaw in an opponent and repeatedly exploiting it. And that's pretty much what they did against Spurs. No, it's not nailed on anymore. It can't be, because City have got a game in hand and they've got to play each other. So it is in both of their hands at the moment. So it's not done. I thought it was a few weeks ago. I am wrong again. I still think they'll win the league. I do. I still think that it's no bad thing necessarily to have these kind of kick up the backsides to switch on. The repeated sharing of individual mistakes is weird. Gabriel's done it a couple of times. Timber's done it. There was a period in the first half where like 6 different Arsenal players made a bad pass in about 10 minutes. They're still having those weird periods, but most of the teams they play from now on, they are significantly stronger and have stronger squad depth.
There we go. Next up for Arsenal, it is Chelsea. Chelsea have got 1 or 2 issues of their own, as we'll be getting onto very, very shortly. But next up, let's have a look at the other games on Sunday. Tum-ty-tum-ty-tum-ty-tum. Sunday's other games, 3 games at 2 o'clock. One of them saw Liverpool going to Nottingham Forest and winning 1-0, but they left it very, very late. Daniel, I imagine you were watching this, as were probably a lot of West Ham fans who must have been very excited come that McAllister goal.
Yeah, it was a pretty cruel blow for Forest, obviously. They were the better team in the first half. They should have taken the lead before half-time. They have now gone 55 shots in the Premier League without scoring a goal, which is, you'd file that under not ideal. And Vitor Pereira was asked whether we might see Chris Wood again for the rest of the season. He kind of said, I hope so. He didn't sound particularly upbeat. So for periods under Sean Dyche, it felt like Forest were basically playing with the ghost of Chris Wood up front, doing the same things, but no Wood there. They've looked really good under Vitor Pereira in the first 1.5 games that he was in charge. The 3-0 win in Fenerbahce was miles above expectation. They played really good football first half, give and go at the opponent, not sitting back. And then, almost got done after 91 minutes when an Ola Aina clearance hits Alexis McAllister on the elbow and goes in and is disallowed because they're the rules. And then, literally 4 minutes later, McAllister does score. I have to say, I thought it was going to be given offside when I saw it, the first replay, and saw it live, to the fact it wasn't hurt twice. I'm minded to think that this is a step forward because the football looks better.
Right.
But the cliche is, results are king when you hit the spring. So Forest need a win at some point pretty soon because they are without them in the Premier League for too long.
Results are king when you hit the spring. Will it be a bummer when comes summer? That'll be the question. Only 2 points, Daniel, between yourselves and the bottom three. And West Ham, Colin says, are turning into Barcelona circa one of the good years. So, very, very worrying. What does this mean for Liverpool, who, with the victory, which, to be fair, Jamie Carragher described as one of the biggest robberies in the Premier League this season. So he wasn't a fan of their performance either. They move up to tie Chelsea and Man United in the race for kind of 4th and 5th.
Yeah, I mean, the main takeaway from the game was that if Arne Slot is going to keep the job beyond this season, he's going to have to make that front three a meritocracy between now and May, because Mohamed Salah was brought off after 77 minutes, same as Cody Gakpo at the same time. And in 20 minutes that remained with injury time, Rio Nagamoa he did miles more than either of them combined. He was direct, he dribbled. Mohamed Salah sort of laughed when he was brought off as if like he couldn't believe it. It's like, you've done absolutely nothing all day, mate. You've not really done anything since you signed that contract. So, they're going to have to... Nagamoa gives them such a burst of energy because he drives at players and he takes them on. He provides crosses into the box from both sides. And, there's just no energy in Liverpool in the first 60 minutes. They were appalling in the first half. They really were. They just looked so flat. If he does that, then they can still qualify for the Champions League because everybody is somewhere between medium and awful in that group from 1 week to the next. So, as you say, they're level on points with Chelsea, which is unthinkable given where we were not that long ago. Yeah,
Chelsea and Man United. Man United, of course, have a game in hand because they're playing on Monday night against Everton. But those three teams, it looks likely that two of them will get into the top 5 in Champions League football and one's going to miss out. Chelsea not doing their chances the best of, not helping their chances on Saturday when they welcomed second from bottom Burnley to Stamford Bridge. And for the second game in a row, the Blues scored early, looked in controls, but then once again set fire to the points, in the words of their manager, Liam Rosenior. Big question, in the 93rd minute, when Burnley had the corner from Ward-Prowse, who missed their assignment? Who?
Well, there is speculation. According to producer Charlie, I don't want to claim responsibility for this.
Yeah.
It was Andre Santos, who was one of Liam Rosenior's most trusted lieutenants during their days at Strasbourg together. But apparently he was not picking up anyone on the fateful Burnley corner. And on the next corner that Burnley had, he was picking up Zian Fleming, which kind of suggests perhaps what he should have been doing for the corner before.
On the next corner, it was Brun Larson had a free header, which went just over the bar as well. Ooh. So obviously this wasn't just an isolated incident. Chelsea did really struggle with those set pieces.
So Burnley had trailed for 89 minutes fully in this game and very nearly took all 3 points.
Yeah, Burnley are an interesting one. I think that they are the lowest quality team in the Premier League in terms of individual.
I thought we gave that to Spurs before.
I think.
Did you not say that they were the worst?
I think they have been
calendar year.
They've been the worst team this calendar year. I think in terms of individual players, right, any team could go down, right? I don't think there's anyone in that Burnley team who screams to me that there'll be other Premier League clubs sort of forming a queue to try to sign them. I think even if you look at Wolves, they've got a handful of players to do, but Burnley aren't really about that. I could see Burnley's team more or less staying the same next year in the Championship. But what I would say about them is that they have plenty of spirit. They have plenty of grit. So obviously to be behind for so long in this game and to get a point, Chelsea only had one shot on target after they scored in the 4th minute. So they really limited what Chelsea could do. But Burnley have done this at Anfield. They did it recently against Manchester United. They almost they came from behind and almost beat Tottenham a couple of weeks ago too. Obviously 2-0 down at Crystal Palace and won. So there's plenty of sort of positive signs there. And I actually think that reflects a lot better on Scott Parker and his coaching team than it does on the club ownership, because I don't think they have recruited in a way that has really given them a fair chance to stay up in the Premier League. I think a lot of their fans probably feel quite similarly to that. But I think that they're probably in this position at the minute where they're the perfect yo-yo team, right? But for Chelsea, this sort of has concluded a run of games where they've played a lot of the teams in and around the bottom. So they played each of the 3 teams in the relegation zone. Played Leeds, who are 15th, Palace, who are 13th. Now they're away to Arsenal, away to Aston Villa. They've got a really difficult run in, but I would maybe sort of balance that a little bit by saying I think this Chelsea team kind of raised their game when their backs are more against the wall and whenever they do have a higher level of opponent. So I think it could be a really interesting couple of months for them, but I think they really need Champions League football.
Okay. Second week in a row that they have dropped points, as I mentioned, after being in a leading position. Lobotics weighs in on this topic. Says, hot take, Villa will be the ones to miss out. Villa, who also ended up drawing with a team kind of relegation battle adjacent in the shape of Leeds. What's happening with Villa, Daniel? Let me just call up the stats here, because it was about a month ago that they hadn't lost at home for a year. And now this weekend, they very nearly lost their 3rd home match in 4.
I mean, they're really struggling in the first half of games at home now to kind of impose themselves. When Villa are at their best, they don't let you breathe. They don't let you get out. It's relentless. That just isn't happening. So the last 4 home games at half-time have been 0-0, 0-1, losing, 0-0, 0-1, losing. They last scored in the first 30 minutes of a home game on the 9th of November. So it's just, they're almost like they're feeling their way into the game. And they were really good second half. And when an opposition team tires, as Leeds did in the last 20, 25 minutes, they are all over you again. But I don't know if it's just, accumulated fatigue. I think they probably need to try Tammy Abraham with Ollie Watkins more, particularly against kind of sturdy, sitting deep defences. But yeah, they just don't really look at it in the first half of games. Even the games they've won. So I remember the Forest game, the first half hour, the crowd were really tetchy until Watkins scored from outside the area. And those outside the area goals have been the kind of pressure valve release this season. But when they don't happen, when they don't create goals out of nothing, they're not really creating goals that much at home. So yeah, I think it's 1 win in the last 4 home games against opponents pretty much that you'd expect them to beat or certainly compete with. And yeah, I can see why our esteemed commenter thinks that they might be the ones to miss out, because they are still in the Europa League. They have got that Thursday, Sunday sort of relentless cycle to come.
Right.
And it is hard to keep up. Okay,
they have a 6-point margin over the team in 6th place, which is still currently Liverpool on goal difference. As for Leeds, that's only 2 defeats now in their last 14 matches. Am I wrong about that, Tom?
No, I was just oohing in anticipation of the imminent conversation about the Anton Stach goal that put them ahead, which was fantastic.
2 defeats in 14. They took the lead here through, as you say, an outrageous free kick.
Yeah, and it was one of those where the free kick taker surprises the goalkeeper by shaping to cross, looking intently at the players on the edge of the penalty area and very deliberately not looking at the goal. and then swinging it into the top corner. But I think it was so well disguised that I think the entire stadium was caught by. I mean, I was caught by surprise watching it on TV at a great distance. And Anton Stach had missed Leeds' 2 previous matches, the 2-2 draw at Chelsea, the 3-1 win over Forest, and he's had a huge impact since he came in. And Daniel Farke really sang his praises in the pre-match press conference, talking about what a complete footballer he is. There was quite a lot of focus last summer about the physical profile of the players who Leeds targeted. Lots of big lads, basically, and Anton Stach was one of those big lads.
Kind of nominative determinism, isn't it?
Well, exactly, very much so. But he's also a really good footballer, and I think he's got 4 goals now in the Premier League, despite generally playing in a fairly conservative midfield role. And yeah, this fantastic piece of invention and audacity, and almost got Leeds a win. I think the concern with Leeds is that they've been on this great run, only 2 defeats, as you say, James, in 14, but they are drawing an awful lot of games. They're not yet completely clear of danger. And they've got 31 points on the board with 11 games still to come. So you would have thought they'll be safe. I think they've shown they're good enough to save themselves, but they need to, start getting a few more wins on the board.
All
right. Just very quickly on this game as well, we talked about Aston Villa's atmosphere. It was interesting because Ollie Watkins, who's been quite badly out of form recently, but he had said that the atmosphere was flat. He was sort of quite critical of people leaving the game early as well. And it's such a curious thing because Villa are having such a good season, but there are these issues where their outgoings are still massive. So their ticket prices are particularly high. I think it's £77-78 for home tickets. And there's a lot of sort of dissatisfaction among the fan base at that kind of pricing structure, and I think that has now sort of filtered through to an atmosphere. And for them to have had such a strong home form and now to be stumbling a bit, it maybe just reflects that a little bit. That fans maybe aren't getting behind them in quite the same way as they might have done just a few months ago. But I do think that them being out of the FA Cup is a big help for them. And we're sort of talking about the sort of relegation battle. I think Nottingham Forest having those European matches can be really not just draining physically, but emotionally. I know that's probably not what Daniel wants to hear, but I do think that could really come into play because all of those teams mentioned in Leeds is sort of lack of defeats. West Ham's very much uptick in form recently, and Forest obviously still have quite a lot of quality in that team too. That's kind of why I'm kind of getting worried about Tottenham, is because they are the one team in that group who are really badly out of form. But that's I think it's going to be really interesting how other teams balance cup commitments with league on top of that, because I think that could be decisive.
Okay. 12 matches to go, of course, and loads to talk about from this weekend, including 2 more games from Sunday afternoon, which we'll do next. Fulham's remarkable win away at Sunderland, and also the latest events in what's turning out to be a troubled time for Oliver Glasner's Crystal Palace. Totally Football Show European edition is out with you Tuesday. We'll be looking forward to the Champions League playoff second legs, which are coming up Tuesday and Wednesday. And looking back on the weekend's action, Real Madrid losing against Osasuna. What does that mean? I don't know. We'll find out on Tuesday. Juventus beaten again. Suddenly all coming unstuck for Spalletti with La Signora. But anyway, that's coming up on Tuesday. Look out for that. Right now, we head to South East London and Crystal Palace, where on Sunday afternoon the mood was dramatic thanks to a dismal run of form. Their 1-1 draw in the Europa Conference League on Thursday at Mostar, and Oliver Glasner, the manager's subsequent presser on Friday, in which he said things like this. And clearly, YouTube viewer, we're not playing those in right now, but they will be in the podcast. And you probably know what he says. He was quite passive-aggressive. Anyway, and then we come back and I go, Sunday then brought a 1-0 win against bottom-of-the-table Wolves, who did have a chance to take the lead themselves, but they saw their penalty saved. They then went down to 10 men, after which Ivan Gasson's goal in the 90th minute earned Palace a much-needed win. How much does that help things? Matt Woosnam joins us now. Matt, Palace getting their first home win in any competition since November, albeit not in the most convincing of fashion. What's the mood post-game, though? Are there changes in store?
It's a pretty negative mood, given that Palace have won. I think really it's a mood of relief, but there's so much anger towards the manager, Oliver Glasner, still. After his pre-match comments, which said that the Palace fans should stay humble, that didn't go down well at all. The fans held up a banner, the Homestyle fanatics and the Ultras group, they held up a banner which referenced his comments and basically said that was unacceptable, and that he had lost the fans. I should say they also aimed criticism at the board as well in that banner. But yeah, given that Palace has just won and that they're on 35 points and 10 clear of the relegation zone, it's all very negative, really.
Well, this is a point that Glasner touched on as well. It has been a remarkable fall in popularity from his successes winning the FA Cup and the results last season. To what extent do you sympathise with his position when he says, I look back because I like to look back at the things we achieved?
Yeah, I think Glasner's been an incredible manager in terms of results. And when things were going well, I thought he spoke incredibly well and came across superbly. He said after the game today that he tells his kids every week to be humble, to stay humble. And I think he did say that to Palace fans throughout this season. But the problem is when you say that, when you've won 1 in 15, now 2 in 16, you can't say that and expect to get away with it and expect fans to accept it. But the results were fantastic. Obviously winning the FA Cup, winning the Community Shield this season, that 19-game unbeaten run across all competitions. But then on the flip side, it goes to I think it ended up being a 12-game winless run. So I completely understand where he's coming from in saying that, the results and look at the results and, appreciate that Palace has done well. But it's the fact that he keeps on saying these things when he should be more contrite and more accepting of the situation being bad and take more responsibility for his own part in that. And I think the performance today was incredibly average against a very poor Wolves side. And 10 men, they didn't really look like they were going to score. And it was a great piece of skill from Tyree Mitchell and a great finish from Evan Gisson, but it wasn't a good performance yet again. And the fans didn't like it at all.
So it's Man United away next Sunday for Palace. Will Oliver still be in charge, do you think, Matt?
I think so. It wouldn't really make sense, in my opinion, to sack him after a win over Wolves, even though the thing that will be in Chairman Steve Parish's mind is the reaction of the fans today. But that has been clear for a long time, and he will be aware of that. But that is where Steve Parish tends to decide on a manager's future, is when they lose the fans, that is kind of what seals their fate. But as I say, Palace are 10 points clear of relegation. They're 3 points off Bournemouth in 8th. They could still have their best ever season, points total in the Premier League. They could still go on and win the Conference League. No one really feels like those things are going to happen. I should make that clear. But unless you have, Glasner has got that experience in Europe. He's won the Europa League with Eintracht Frankfurt. To get rid of him before that game against Mostar on Thursday, the second leg, wouldn't make sense. I think more likely than not, he will be in charge against Man United. But I don't think anyone can say with 100% certainty that he will be.
Matt Woosnam. Some would say 10 points clear with the relegation spectre safely at bay is actually not a bad time to maybe make a change that needs making. But poor Wolves, they were seconds away from going level with Derby, 07-08 on 11 points, but instead have to wait for another week. Any thoughts on Palace? I don't imagine that anybody else saw this because we were all... Colin, you were watching the Sunderland Fulham. Tom, you were all over, I think, your way back from Paris.
I was.
And Daniel, you'll have something to say, I'm sure, in the score in the eye.
I have indeed, yeah. I think Glasner should go straight away.
Right, there you go. Okay. Sunderland Fulham, Colin. What a surprise this was. Fulham had lost 3 straight games. Sunderland, who until their most recent home match against Liverpool had been perfect at home. What happened here?
Yeah, so probably unsurprisingly, this first half was very disjointed in the sense that these two teams entered the game without any real form behind them. It was disjointed even more so with Sunderland having injuries to Nori McGeely and Jocelyn Tabi, who I think that's how you pronounce him, an Ivorian winger. He's making his Premier League debut, having joined the club last month. And Sunderland have had a bit... like Sunderland's early season form was all about the sort of continuity and the combinations they had, and they managed to embed a lot of new signings in very quickly, but that has been disrupted so heavily, first of all by AFCON, and then by a lot of injuries. And granted, Xhaka came back for this game, but he was only as a second half substitute. So yeah, they missed him quite a lot. This game, Fulham were always in the ascendancy, albeit there wasn't really too much going on until the second half. And the game turned whenever Romain Mundle, who had been one of the first half substitutions, missed a really good opportunity for Sunderland that was against the run of play, but he found himself free of one-on-one in the area and he put it wide. Minutes later, Fulham go up the other end. They go in front for a Raul Jimenez header, a free header from a corner. A couple of minutes after that, he then makes it 13 penalties from 13 in the Premier League that he has scored, which is a league record. And Sunderland did rally. They had a penalty of their own, Enzo Lefebvre. He didn't do another Panenka like he did against Brentford. That got him quite a lot of criticism. He blasted this one into the top corner. But Fulham got a third late on through Alex Iwobi, who was probably the man of the match. I think he was, again, very, very impressive. He links everything up so well for them in the final third. And he had a really nice finish for this goal. And yeah, I mean, Fulham back into the top half, it's very, very congested in that area. Sunderland are in a mini slump. And I was sort of thinking, the form that they've been in for the past sort of month or so, maybe a little bit concerning, but they're not going to go down. They're 11 points above the relegation zone. They've got a lot of time to sort of take in these problems and maybe have a bit of a reset going in maybe to the final stretch of the season, but also targeting the positions they might need in summer as well. So it's not the worst time for them to hit a poor run of form because they've no pressure on them. And yeah, Fulham are just Fulham, aren't they? I mean, I always say it, but I always think that they're a 6 or a 7 out of 10. You can always sort of rely on them to put in a consistent, reliable level of performance. And yeah, they're 10th in the league, which kind of speaks to that too. So there wasn't too much that you would learn from this game other than the fact that, yeah, Sunderland's squad depth maybe does leave them a little short whenever they have a few players out, I think, and that was the case in this game.
Magnificent. Let's move on then to Saturday night's Manchester City victory over Newcastle. 17th straight win at home to the Magpies. This one looked like it was a tough test, though. The way the City players, City manager as well, looked drained at the final whistle. They'd been in a real battle. Was it Newcastle making a real go of it, or was it City's own wastefulness? What was the story here?
Well, it's the kind of classic City performance, specifically in 2026, where they start pretty strongly and then just seem to kind of run out of ideas at half time and find themselves trying to manage the game, albeit with the difference on this occasion that Newcastle equalised very swiftly after Nico O'Reilly had put City ahead. O'Reilly then restored City's lead pretty much equally swiftly, but the game kind of sort of drifted out a little bit. City still had most of the ball, but weren't creating masses of chances, and ended up having to get through a fairly nervy last few minutes. Newcastle won a corner right at the end. Nick Pope, I think they might win a couple of corners. Nick Pope goes up, and you thought, they could very easily concede an avoidable equaliser here. I thought it was interesting how City lined up. It looks like Pep Guardiola has settled on a new go-to system for big matches. This is the same system that we saw in the win at Liverpool a couple of weeks ago, where Erling Haaland has got Omar Marmoush up front alongside him. You've then basically got a diamond midfield with Rodri at the base, Semenyo and O'Reilly on either side, and then Bernardo Silva in this kind of free role as a 10 when City have the ball and kind of drifting around when they don't. And I think there are several advantages to that system. One of them is that you get Nico O'Reilly in his preferred position. We got so used to seeing him as a left back that people forget, he came through the academy as an elegant ball-carrying attacking midfielder, and we're now seeing that. He scored a beautiful goal in the 3-0 win over Fulham, scored a really nicely taken brace, and the second one against Newcastle was quite funny because it was him heading in across from Erling Haaland. And Haaland, when he's got Marmoush alongside him, rather than out on one of the wings, gets much more involved in the play. I think he had more touches yesterday than in any previous Manchester City appearance. So having another striker alongside him And having that different system behind him means that he's more heavily involved. He didn't score, but he did set up the second goal, and he looked a bit more connected to the
second goal. After putting the cross in, he
showed Nico O'Reilly the way to go. So not a massively convincing win for City, but it keeps them on this positive dynamic. That's 3 wins in a row, beginning with that win at Liverpool, which felt very important in terms of its timing. Allowed them to put the pressure back on Arsenal. And this system does feel like it's giving them something a bit different.
Okay. FPL Banger Podcast says, how has Pep managed to turn Nico O'Reilly from Zinchenko to Yaya Toure in a couple of months?
I mean, he was Yaya Toure already. Guardiola was trying to turn him into Zinchenko, who, lest we forget, can also play midfield. And then realised actually he was better off just keeping him in the Toure role.
Wow.
Well, I think the thing about Nico O'Reilly is he was a very impressive at left back as well. It's not like he was struggling there. I mean, there was a lot of talk that he could be England's starting left back in the World Cup this summer. But he's got the passing ability. He's got the positional awareness. He's got the discipline to do the defensive work as well. And he's probably learned a lot of left back doing that. But also that ability to time runs into the box. And when you do have Erling Haaland up front, what that means is that the defence inevitably kind of drops back against him. So it does create that little bit of space in the edge of the area. And City maybe lacked a little bit of that dynamism in previous years, and they've got more of that now. But stylistically, this is such a different Man City from the previous editions of winning leagues, when it was all about control of the ball and sort of pass and movement to work spaces. Now it's much more direct, it's much more vertical, and that speaks to the players that they've been signing. Antoine Semenyo, of course, in January adds to that as well, just in terms of his directness, his running and his power. They're a different team.
Also, a little bit earlier on in the season, Gigi Donnarumma, how influential he's been, and a big save to keep this incredible streak of victories against Newcastle at home going. They're going to be meeting again in the FA Cup 5th round in a couple of weeks' time. They could potentially meet up as well in the Champions League. Very good. That keeps City, as you say, on Arsenal's coattails. Elsewhere this weekend, there was a 0-0 draw, but probably a useful point for West Ham at home to Bournemouth. That was Saturday tea time. West Ham with 20 shots, their most in a game this season.
Almost a couple of worldies, one per team in the Ryan, who's made this fantastic start to life at Bournemouth, this young Brazilian player who's come in from Vasco da Gama.
Hyan.
I mean, Hyan. If Jack Lang was here, he'd be aggressively correcting me right now. Hyan. It does make it sound kind of curious, doesn't it? But I mean, there we go.
That's his name, Tom. What can I tell you?
Flicks the ball up deep in his own half out on the right wing, flicks it over a defender who slides in to try and dispossess it, drives down the right-hand side, cuts in to the edge of the box, then curls in a shot that flicks the outside of the post. And then moments later, Tati Castellanos almost scores a worldie at the other end with an Andy Carroll tribute of an overhead bicycle kick that flew over the crossbar. West Ham's expected goals in this was nearly 3. Wow. So it felt quite an even game, but in terms of the quality of chances, they were almost all West Ham's. And ultimately, two teams who are both on a good run of form, points not a terrible result for either, kind of cancel each other out in a way.
You were watching this for Match of the Day in Paris?
Yes.
Right, what did they make
of
it? What did they make of Saturday's action in general, actually?
So we started off with a multiplex. So we had the 3 o'clock kickoffs on simultaneously, all of which were slow burners, but all of which featured a degree of late drama. Well, Villa Leeds did, and Chelsea Burnley did. Brentford Brighton did not, but we got a couple of goals. West Ham Bournemouth a little bit sleepy, and then City Newcastle a great way to end the day.
They were happy. Okay, good. Sean Self writes in, says, you joke about Bournemouth. We talk about Brazilian players feeling at home there because of the beach and that. Sean Self says there's genuinely a largest Brazilian contingent living there specifically because of the beach. A friend of mine, his partner is Brazilian, and moved them down there and opened a Brazilian cafe.
I mean, if you were trying to sign Brazilian players and you're at Bournemouth, you are going to flag the proximity to the beach.
Yeah.
Don't necessarily show them what it looks like or talk about average temperatures or boring details like that. Bottom line, there's a beach. You're Brazilian. You do the math.
I think wherever you're from, show them the beach.
Show them the beach.
Okay.
And they will come.
Brentford took on Brighton this weekend. Another beach adjacent side who were at the G-Tech and produced a 2-0 victory. 10th of November 2002. Daniel Storey, what was number 1?
Unbreakable by Westlife.
Oh, you're a big Westlife fan.
It would be weird if I'd have known that, but I have read that this week.
Have you?
Sure.
Yeah,
We believe you, mate.
Yeah, that and I'm a Westlife stan, yeah.
Yeah, and what an appropriate track to have been number one when a 16-year-old and 309 day, well, when a 16 years and 309 day old boy, that sounds strange however you say it, when at the age of 16 years and 309 days, a young lad by the name of James Milner took the field, becoming the Premier League's second youngest player ever at the time. He went on to record a number of remarkable feats, including becoming the youngest goal scorer in Premier League history later that season at the age of 16 years and 356 days. I've learnt my lesson now. He's turned out for 6 Premier League sides. He has reached now the greatest number of games ever, most number of appearances in the Premier League, 654. He is James Milner. Best stat of all, and this is one that does my head in. James Milner has played in 1.3% of every top flight game since 1888. All the top flight games played in all the seasons in over 100 years, well over 100 years. More than 1% of those there's been James Milner in. And crazily enough, Gareth Barry, you can say the same about him because he's only got 1 game less.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, you do the math. You already have done the math.
Well, I
you
haven't.
Brought the math. Someone else has done the math.
Duncan Alexander
did
the math, but I wouldn't believe it.
Yeah, well, maths can do that.
Yeah. Here's another stat. Just over 5,000 players have featured in the Premier League since it was formed in faraway 92-93. Of those, almost half, 49%, have either played alongside James Milner or against him in a football match. Isn't that incredible? How incredible is James Milner, Daniel?
Yeah, he is incredible. He really is. I mean, this is a testimony. I think there's been a lot talked about his longevity, which I get. He's 40 years old. He's playing as an outfielder in the Premier League. That is amazing. The longevity angle has come about because he hasn't been a regular for a long time. So he last started 20 league games in a Premier League season in 2017. So between the ages of 31 and 40, he's basically been able to do half seasons, which has kept him going. I think the great credit to him about the number of appearances is that he made so many before he was 21. That's the remarkable thing. And he is now a very, very, very nice person, a very good teammate, a very useful squad member to have around. And so people give him contracts because he's a brilliant, role model and leader at a club without, he's not a chest-beating passion leader, but he leads by example. So that's why he's around and that's why he's still getting game time in the Premier League. And yeah, I mean, it's absolutely phenomenal. He looked a bit sheepish about the whole thing on Saturday. He obviously knew it was coming, but there was a big deal made of him. His teammates had to kind of push him forward at full time. I'm glad for him that it came with Brighton winning because they've been on a rotten run. And if it had happened with a kind of 2-0 defeat to Brentford rather than 2-0 win, it would have probably been missed. But he got his moment. And so, yeah, I mean, 40 years old. As a fellow 40-year-old man, to be still playing elite level Premier League football is ludicrous.
Not to poop the James Milner party. Obviously, this is a great achievement. Everyone loves James Milner, but let's not forget. You look at the list of all-time Premier League appearance makers. James Milner 1, Gareth Barry 2. Take a random example. Ryan Giggs number 3. Made 40 appearances in English First Division before the launch of the Premier League.
Right.
So has played that number of games more than Premier League historians would have you think. And as journalists in particular, but for all of us, fans of the Premier League, it makes sense to talk about things in Premier League terms. But the whole point of records is that they are historic, and Premier League era records overlook 100 years plus of English Football League history. The actual record holder for English top division appearances is Peter Shilton. He played 848 matches. I don't think that Milner or Barry or even Ryan Giggs even creep into the top 20. And we all remember football before 1992. So you see these Premier League era stats, you think, oh, okay, yes, Premier League era, football existed beforehand. In like 30, 40 years' time, when we're still only talking about the Premier League, those 100 years plus of English football history just won't come up at all. And I, for one, I can hear Duncan Alexander rolling his eyes at me as I speak. But I think that is a great pity. I remember seeing a stat at some point, Sergio Aguero had gone past Dennis Law in terms of English First Division goals. That meant an awful lot more to me than seeing him, outscore Niall Quinn or Dion Dublin or something. And I think around the world, people really admire the history of English football. And I think we all do English football a disservice by, going along with this slight pretense that what happened in 1992 marked a fundamental change with what existed before.
Right.
Obviously, the Premier League revolutionised English football. Was a massive deal. The razzmatazz,
right.
The money, etc.
Just one thing. Did you begin all of this by saying, I don't want to poop the party at all, and proceeded to then completely body James Milner's...
I thought if I just ploughed straight in with the party pooping, you guys wouldn't take it. I thought I'll lull them into a false insecurity by pretending I'm not going to do this.
Yeah.
With all due respect to James Milner.
I think if we're doing shout outs, not just for other reasons, but rather than Peter Shilton, we should shout out Tony Ford, who is the record Football League appearance maker for outfield players.
Okay.
Goalkeepers just stand there.
Who was he, Daniel?
So he played 931 games, but the greatest thing about him is that he started his first Football League appearance was in 1975, and his last was in 2002, and he's an outfield player. Like, that's the good stuff.
Seconded. That is the good
you got
stuff.
a way to go, James Milner. Get ironing. Good. I think that brings us to the end of today's show. As mentioned, we're going to be covering all the Euro-related topics or the continental news from the weekend, and a look ahead at those Champions League playoff second legs coming up Tuesday, Wednesday in our European edition on Tuesday morning. We will then have a special show on Wednesday reacting to Tuesday night's games, and another one on Thursday morning too. Woof. For now, though, many thanks as ever to Daniel. Look forward to hearing your verdicts and conclusions in the eye this week. Tom, many thanks to you for making it in, and yourself too. Colin Millar, and to Jake and Charlie in the booth, and you, listeners and viewers. Many, many thanks for your company. We'll be back soon. For now, from all of us here, it's goodbye.